Hey, parkour business owners. This is me, Jimmy Davidson with Motion Mentors. And today I want to talk about the role of the CEO and the distractions that the CEO are very commonly facing, holding them back from fulfilling on their job as the CEO. So this episode is about distractions, the ones that we've seen, what I would like to see be done about those distractions, and why it matters. So let me start with the job of the CEO. The job of the CEO is to relentlessly find the constraint of the business and release it so that the business can grow to the point of its next constraint. The CEO does that over and over and over again. A constraint, or otherwise known as the bottleneck of the business, that is like the point at your business, the point somewhere along in your business where it is the thing holding everything else back. Another way to look at it is the thing that if you affected it, it would have the best impact on your business, also for the least amount of effort put into it. Okay, so it's kind of like a kink in a hose, right? If your hose has like a sharp fold in it, a kink, you can't just turn the water pressure on higher. Because it's all stopped at that kink. You can't make the end of the hose bigger, hoping more water comes out because it's stopped at that kink, right? That kink is the constraint of the hose. So the CEO's job is to find that thing and fix it. The problem is that the average CEO of the average small business, in this case, parkour gyms or a parkour clothing company or a parkour media house, like the parkour business, the CEO, the person in charge, is often either completely distracted, unaware of what the constraint is or how to find it, or in some way, stuck. And so there's 4 ways that someone can be stuck. And it's important to distinguish that because that's how we're going to get into, well, if you're distracted or if there's something stopping you from finding the constraint, what do you actually do about it? So to run through them quick, the 4 ways, you could be flat. And if a CEO is flat, that means like they're emotionally flat. They just kind of stop caring. They stop feeling the passion. They just don't care. There's like an emotional blockage there. So that's one. I don't see that too often in parkour, although I have seen it, especially when the business owner isn't really passionate about parkour. Maybe they just got into it because they thought it was a fun business, but they themselves don't love parkour. I have seen that in some gym owners, but it's not, I wouldn't zoom in on that. That doesn't really characterize most of the parkour gym owners or business owners, frankly, that I've seen. The other one is that they are lost. Lost is you just straight up don't know what to do. You are staring into the abyss and you need help. Normally the remedy on that is you need a mentor, or you need someone to give you the resource, the tip, the hot take on what to do next, and hopefully they're correct about it. So if you're lost, you just don't know what to do. If you are stalled or stuck, that is, you do know what to do, but you are just basically a deer in the headlights. You're frozen. You don't know how to do it. Something about it has you totally stopped. There's strategies there. And then the real big one that I want to lean into today is you could be swerving. Swerving is the final way that an entrepreneur can be stopped. Swerving is when you are just going from task to task. You're working on this thing, then the next day you're working on that thing, and then the next day, there's a shiny object, and you want to work on this other thing that may be like a totally new business or something completely unrelated to the constraint. Okay, so those are all the ways that a business owner could be stopped in addressing their constraint. And zooming in on swerving specifically, distraction. There's been a couple flavors of this that I've seen in parkour business owners recently. So I don't want to talk about any specific business owners, but we have seen some patterns, and I want to talk about those patterns and those categories. So one of them, I'm just going to jump right in. One of them is when the business owner wants to take on all the perceivable problems with their business at once. And so there was one business owner who signed up with Motion Mentors kind of early on when we first launched. And this business owner got on a call with me, and it was a paid call. They paid for it. They wanted to get as much out of it as possible. And I get that. To me, from my perspective, it was really clear the one thing that they needed to do. And that one thing also just needed some time and focus and attention. And I said it, it didn't take long to explain. It was something that was simple, but not easy, right? And that thing needed eyes on it. That thing needed leadership. That thing needed proper management. That thing needed, it was like growing a new head for that business. But that CEO on that call who just wanted to kind of, like it felt like to me like they were just making a list of to-dos. And so after I said that thing, their words were, okay, what else? And from my perspective, I was like, right now there's nothing else. Like, this is the thing that you need to work on. But that business owner just wanted more items. And at that time, I didn't have the confidence to be like, I'm not going to give you the next thing because I don't trust that you'll do this thing, right? We need to do this thing. I didn't have that, I guess, that strength as a mentor at that time. I certainly do now, probably because what happened to that business owner shortly after. Anyway, okay, so I said their constraint. They said, what else? And then I said, well, okay, I guess if you solved that, your follow-on constraint, I would assume, would then end up being this. And then I said the next thing. And then they said, okay, what else? And then I said, well, I guess then this would be the thing that would be the challenge. And maybe I gave them like 4 or 5 problems. And I was confident in those problems because I knew where they were at as a business. I was once there. And I remember the pain and the obstacles of growing through that stage. And then we got off the call and I didn't feel good about it. And, lo and behold, that gym owner didn't book another call. They wanted to just take it all on. And when I checked in with that business, particularly I checked in with their GM who I just knew personally, just wanted to see like, hey, did any of this stuff end up happening? And their business actually got worse because the gym owner attempted to just work on all of it. And mostly the gym owner just sort of like abdicated the responsibilities, like said like, hey, you just do this big, hairy, scary, audacious thing that our mentor said to do. I want you to do it. Just pointing at a random employee in their business. But he did that like 6 times with the different tasks that they could have done. And they just abdicated them to a bunch of random employees. And the GM attempted to take on multiple of those things. And ultimately, it actually made everything worse, right? All those employees trying to take on these like new tasks and roles with basically no training and almost no context. They attempted, and it actually just ruined their flow. They had no systems for it, and all of their KPI went down, and the culture of the gym also went down. And I heard that business owner was just mad, right? And to me, now that makes a lot of sense. And that's why if a business owner was like, okay, give me 15 things to do right now today, I wouldn't, unless I had like a pre-existing solid track record that entrepreneur was capable of doing that. But that's a unicorn. That, like, let me back up. The moral of the story is you should just be focusing on your one constraint. If you're on a phone call with me, or you have another mentor, whoever it is, with your mom, and they give you the one thing to work on next, and then you still have 45 minutes left on that call, then stop talking and get to work. Hang up the phone or ask them to, hey, will you stay with me while I start working on this? That is much more valuable. That'll get you much more traction than saying, okay, what else? Let me pack my to-do list. All right. So that was one type of business owner who, despite seeing their constraint, they began swerving and they kind of made everything worse. Let me change gears. Here is a different bucket of entrepreneur. We've seen a few of these as well. And the thing I'm about to say was completely holding these entrepreneurs back. And again, they saw what to do, but something was getting in their way. And the thing that was getting in their way was they were taking on all this extra stuff that had nothing to do with their constraint. So some examples include, there was a business owner who had all these private lessons. Like them, the CEO had so many private lessons that it was actually completely dominating their schedule. And when we explored that, and frankly, my advice was like, just stop doing that. Kick all those private lessons off, give them to some other coach, unless those private lessons start paying you like $2,500 an hour. That's the only way it makes sense for you. And that gym owner did do a good job in systematically offloading those private lessons, but it did take some convincing. It did take a couple of conversations, and I get it. It's an emotional experience. They are your private lesson students, and in that case, that gym owner had those lessons for, in some cases, like every single week for the last 3 years. So it can be tough to offload that. But that was up until I got in there with that business owner. That business owner had kind of been stuck with their schedule, having no room to actually work on the business because they were working in the business, just doing all these private lessons. Another example is a business owner who is doing like extracurricular stuff outside of their business. So in this example, there was a gym owner who is going to school for just whatever else. The thing that they were going to school for had nothing to do with their gym. It was just like a personal passion that they wanted to do. And the end goal wasn't really even necessarily to use that degree or that knowledge back in the business. It was just sort of like, I started going to school for this when I was younger, and I didn't really know how to grow my business after a certain point, so I just decided to go back to school. And then that's where me, the mentor, jumped in. That I was hired at that point. And then when I'm looking at the business, I'm saying, okay, this is your constraint. If we fix this, your numbers will start to look like this. Your business will grow to this point. Like, cool, we get that. Business owner agreed. I agreed. We all celebrated. We on spreadsheet, our gym is growing. But in reality, that gym owner was spending so much time either being at school or working in the business, because there wasn't really that well thought out of a team. Like there was some lacking on the coaches, there's some lacking on the sales team, the front desk team. So when the business owner was there, the business owner felt like they actually had to do a lot of the roles, like be the coach, be the front desk person. And then when they are not doing that, they were in school, they were studying, they were up late writing the paper. And so when I checked back in on them and said, hey, did you do the thing? Essentially it was no, like there was no progress made. And that caused me to be completely stopped in helping them, because I couldn't really progress until they, did X, Y, and Z. And it was something that I couldn't do for them. It was on them. And so then it was just a hard conversation. Like, why are you doing this? And that's also very emotional, like school is like a big, and especially for this business owner, it was like a personal endeavor. They already had half the degree finished. They just wanted to go back and finish it. They spent the money, they made the time commitment. And it felt like a hard decision to undo. And so that's that. Like the thing to be done was like, you just got to win back your time. You have to say no to some hard stuff. And that might be say no to your business. That might be say no to going back to school. That might be say no to all these private lesson students you have. That might be say no to the thing that's eating up your time. But from my perspective as a mentor, that still occurred to me as swerving. You're just focusing on all these things, but you're not focusing on the thing that makes the difference in the business, right? This is all in context of like, we're trying to grow the business. Okay. Beyond that, I think there is certainly a level of, so we were talking about swerving, right? They just keep task switching, but there's also being lost, or there's being stuck. Being lost is like, you don't know where your constraint is. You don't know what to focus on. So there it might just be like a data issue or a skill issue. Data issue being like, if you just knew your leads coming in, your sales metrics, you knew your average length of how long a member was a member at your gym for, you knew the average profitability per each new member. Like if you saw all those metrics lined up happily in a row, you, the business owner, might look at it and be like, oh shit, well, if we just fix this, then we make a meaningful difference in the business. But if you don't have any of those metrics, you can't look at them and then find the weakest link. You just simply cannot. Another one is if you have those metrics, but you don't have the skill to look at them and find the constraint within them. Because a lot of the times the constraint isn't completely obvious unless you have a lot of experience looking at it. But maybe your business looks fine. There's no one thing that really stands out. Well, what do you do then? And it's context specific. In this example, if everything's working fine, then we should probably raise prices. Or if everything's working fine, then we could probably, shove in some more clients in there. We want to keep growing this until something breaks. And the part of the hose that breaks, or the part of the hose that kinks, that's your constraint. So, and that's in a nutshell what to do there. But the point is that a lot of the times the business owners don't have the data to find the constraint or the skill to look through their data and find the constraint. So if you're a CEO, your job is to find the constraint and work to solve it, and do solve it over and over and over. When you do find that constraint, what it looks like from there is you jump in with both feet on that issue. So, let's bring in Elon Musk for an example. Whatever you think about the guy in the current political climate, talking about him specifically as an entrepreneur, he's famous for knowing like the bottleneck of, let's just say, PayPal or Tesla or whatever one of his companies. If he found it at a specific element of his business, he would go and talk to the engineer that was closest to the problem and spend time on it with that engineer. He wouldn't just like sit in his chair from afar and be like, hey, solve that. He would jump all the way in there, work directly with anyone who has their hands directly on it until it was resolved. And then he would back up, find the next constraint, and then walk over to that department, walk right up to that person who has their hands on it, get his boots on the, car assembly factory line floor and figure out like what steps can we remove, because our constraint is we got to get more cars off the line. So our constraint is like, throughput per hour or whatever, however he would define it. He would get his boots on the floor and personally figure it out. And he would do that. A CEO ought to do that until that constraint is lifted. And then you can take your hands off of that problem, take another step back, look at your metrics, look at everything else, and there always will be a next constraint. And that's your job over and over and over. And that's how you build a company that is profitable and worth it so that you don't have to go back to school. Profitable and worth it so that you don't need to pack your schedule with private lesson students. Okay, so if you're feeling lost, you don't know what to work on, if you're feeling stuck, like you see the data, but you might not know how to actually make a change or fix your constraint, if you're swerving, you're feeling like your neurospicy ADHD brain, and maybe it's not even that, maybe you just have a lot of interests. I don't know. You're just going all over the place. You're working on a big mural on your gym one second, and then the next second you're launching some new chat GPT thing that has nothing to do with your constraint. And then the next second you're taking a trip overseas for some amount of time. And then, I don't know, whatever it is, you might identify with the CEO that is swerving. You might feel like you're the CEO who's flat, who's just stopped caring, and you don't have the passion or emotional bandwidth to jump into finding your constraint. Wherever you may be, I love this conversation. So does Christopher. So if you're feeling like you need help, jump in, get in contact with us, head to motionmentors.org and book that call. Let us know what you think your constraint might be, or let us know that you don't know where your constraint is, but here are your metrics, and challenge us to find your constraint. I'd love to do that. Also, there's plenty of free resources on our website, on our blog. So oftentimes if we find a constraint in your business and we have an article that talks specifically about it, it's right there for free. The thing that you need to do, or at least that we think you ought to do, might already be like beautifully typed up. We might even have a full podcast on it. But we don't know until you let us know, or until you get in contact with us. So if that sounds cool to you, head to motionmentors.org, go to the book a call. We'd be stoked to help you out. All right. Beyond that, guys, I hope that this was helpful. Keep in mind, if you are the CEO, that is your job. And if you find yourself not working on your constraint, you might have an issue. All right, cool. That's it. My name is Jimmy Davidson. Thanks for spending the time. And my goal is to grow the parkour industry so that we can together teach 1 million people parkour, but not just teach them how to jump over trapezoids. I am out to give them that juice of parkour, that passion that I know that I got when I was a teenager, the thing that shifted my life, and the thing that gave me that I am someone who can overcome obstacles in my path, that I am someone who can do hard things. That is what my parkour gyms are out to do with people. And I know that the more parkour businesses that also find their stride, find their way to be profitable while making a positive impact on their community, that rising tide really does help me achieve my goal, helps you achieve your goal. So that's why I'm not going to be found as being flat in this business, being lost to passion, because I love this shit, man. This is good. Okay. All right. That's it. Peace.